Hello again, everybody. It's your old pal Guardian Enzo coming to you as always live on tape from beautiful downtown Kyoto, Japan. As I record, we're just in pushing the Ides of March almost, and I'm actually going to be moving at the very time when I'm publishing the preview this season, spring 2025. So it may be a little shorter than normal. So if I know I say that and don't usually follow through on it, but it may be a little bit shorter than normal this time just because I'm insanely busy and stressed out over moving, as moving is something I absolutely hate. But in any event, for the record, I'm staying within Kyoto, just moving more conveniently to transportation for work and all that stuff. So anyway, so it's spring 2025. I believe this is preview number 56 for Lost in Anime, if I'm not mistaken. Wow, 56 previews. That's crazy. And there's a lot of interesting things kind of going on in a sort of a supplementary mode to this preview. That the anime announcements we've gotten over the last several months have been the worst since I've been doing this, and that's not something that's necessarily going to be reflected in this season so much, although it is to an extent. But the nature of the cycle is that really means that the second half of 25, 26, going into 26 look really, really rough. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I'm not saying the sky's falling here. It is the worst stretch of new anime announcements since I've been doing this. And people will say, oh, what about Vigilante? What about something, Freywind Season 2, all this? Sure, there are always exceptions. You always get a couple of good shows. I shouldn't say always, but so far at least, that no matter how bad things have gotten, there's always been a couple of exceptions because manga has so many good series that sell well that seemingly there always are going to be a couple that get adapted in any given year. But generally speaking, it's been really, really rough. Just not a lot of ambition, the same formula, really unambitious stuff, the same isekai, cute girls doing cute things, wincest, all this same kind of nonsense, you know, ghoul schools and exorcists and witches and cute girls doing bowling, and it's just a really depressing time for me. It's been a really depressing time in terms of new series announcements, and we're starting to see the impact of that in this spring 2025 season, which charitably maybe looks average to me. But spring and fall are supposed to be the best and biggest seasons of any typical anime year. Not always, but typically. Certainly spring, more than any other season, has been the best season of any given year statistically. And it's certainly not from lack of shows. There's plenty of series on the schedule. I mean, we've got 57, 58 shows, depending on, I guess, Moonrise makes it 58. That was a late announcement. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Last year we had 54 in spring, so it's a little bit more. But winter had 53. So I think these big gaps in number of shows between spring, fall, and summer, winter are starting to flatten out. And we're still getting way more anime than the anime production capacity can handle, really. And that's one of the problems. But the larger point is that the lack of good anime is not from the lack of anime. It's just too much of it is not good. But it is a season with 57 shows or 58, and I'm previewing 19 of them. My usual Enzo 1/3 rule, it hit right on the nosy this time. 1/3 of the shows I'm previewing, but it's a weird kind of preview in that it has a few shows in the top category. We've got 4 highest expectation shows, which is a perfectly normal amount. But very, very little in the mid-table. In fact, until Moonrise hit very late, there was only 3 shows in the mid-table, which was probably the smallest mid-table I've ever had. And then just a shit ton of stuff in the modestly interested category, 12 shows. So, and all those are frankly pretty pretty interchangeable to me, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. Genre demographic wise, one thing that does give me hope this season is we've got a fair amount of seinen shows, and the more seinen shows are on the schedule, even if they're not ones I have a specific reason to think are going to be good, statistically there's a better chance a random seinen is going to be good than any other demo. So some hope there. Pretty heavy sci-fi season, I would say. Quite a few sci-fis, quite a lot of originals too. As has been the norm in the last few years, the originals are not striking me as being super, super interesting, but there are a lot of them at the very least. Not much sports, not a lot of rom-com. The isekai, and as I said, and the magic school, and the same old drac that we get mostly in every season now. But we always hope. And if there's anything specifically with the schedule itself that gives me some hope this season, it's the sheer number of seinen shows is fairly high. So maybe that's an indication that the season could upside surprise a little bit. Okay, and with that, then let's dive right in and start looking at the spring 2025 schedule. As usual, we have a poll over there in the sidebar, so please vote on it. And as usual, we have the YouTube video, which you'll see linked at the bottom of this post. And as usual, I will repeat myself ad nauseum. I go into more detail in this in the YouTube video portion, which you're watching right now, than I do in the website post, which is more just kind of giving a summary of things. This one will be more focused on detail on the shows I'm focused on, and the website version is more just giving a more comprehensive look of those 19 shows that we deem worth previewing, so to speak. And the first one on the list is Vigilante, Boku no Hero Academia Illegals. As I say, we have 4 shows in highest expectations this season, and these are all pretty much in a bucket for me. I could have ranked them in any order. I'm going with Vigilante as the first one because just the sheer expectation of having waited for so long for this to be an announcement. For those who don't know, Vigilante is Boku no Hero Academia spin-off manga, and it was written by an artist named Betancourt and a writer named Furuhashi Hideyuki, and supposedly they both worked with Horikoshi Kohei to make sure that this kind of meshed with his vision for the series. And I think both because they're established mangaka and quite talented, and because of that close relationship they had with the original writer and artist, for that matter, I think Illegals probably ranks in the top 5 to 10% of all spin-off manga I've ever followed. It's that good because it accomplishes the two things a great spin-off manga should. It is faithful in spirit to the original. It feels like it's legitimately of the same canon, and yet it attacks it from a different enough perspective that it feels like something you would never get from the parent series and offers something new to the experience. So mission accomplished on that front. It is a Bones series, which is great. We kind of figured it would be since the Hiraka is, but it is Bones. The previews look great. No reason to think Illegals is not going to be really good because, frankly, the manga is really good. It tells the story of these vigilantes, these halfway between heroes and villains, I guess you might say. It's those who aren't deemed worthy of the hero label, and they work kind of below the radar, and they're secretly going about doing quasi-heroic things, but not always. It's that gray area, that part of society that the hero society doesn't want you to realize exists. And there's a wide range of people in that group, starting from the protagonist, who's just a nice college kid with hero aspirations, who doesn't have what it takes to be a true hero, a licensed hero, to some genuinely messed up social outcast figures who are into some dark stuff. So, and it has a great sporting cast. There are some crossovers with the parent series. We get some characters from the main series like Eraserhead and Present Mike are in this quite a bit. So it's just a really good series that gives a very distinct and interesting and different look at Boku no Hero Academia. And the only thing that's really puzzling about Illegals, I have to say, is that it took so long for it to be greenlit as an anime. I mean, and there's no real reason that one looks at and see. The manga has been over for a while. It was quite popular when it was running. So you would have expected to get this anime, I would have thought, a couple of years ago. And it always struck me as odd that it never got one. But it never did, for whatever reason. It is now. And better late than never, I say. Probably going to be 2 cours, which they should be able to do a pretty decent adaptation in 2 cours, I would say. Ideally, you'd want 3, but they may be able to do it in 2. We'll see how it goes. And that's Vigilante. That's my number 1 series of the season. Oh, as I say, the 4 series I have in highest any one of them could have been number 1. I ranked them in no particular order. The next one on that list is Kowloon Generic Romance, which is by the mangaka Maizuki Jun, who wrote Koi wa Amegari no Yo ni, After the Rain. And I ended up being a pretty big fan of that series, both anime and manga form, despite being highly skeptical of the premise. If you've seen or read it, you know what I mean. My co-host on the manga podcast, Samu, My Taste is Better Than Yours, is a huge fan of this series and thinks it'll really work for me, and I see no reason to think otherwise. A story about the future in the Kowloon in the Far East, which is at this point a walled city. And there's 2 people who work in a real estate office. One of them is very forward-thinking. The woman is very progressive. She likes groundbreaking new technology. The guy, he likes the old school Hong Kong from the romantic past. There's a sci-fi element here. Like I said, I have not read this one. Well, I just did say it. I haven't read this one myself, so I don't know too many of the details on it. But I have a lot of respect for the mangaka, and the whole thing has kind of a Konsatoshi vibe for me, which I consider a good thing. Now, it's not like After the Rain. It's not from a big glamour studio like WIT. This is a studio called Arvo Animation, and it does not have a big, famous, legendary director. So you wonder a little bit about whether After the Rain kind of surfed by to an extent on how great the direction was, Watanabe Ayumu, and how great the animation and art was. Not to say that Kowloon Generic Romance looks bad in preview form. It looks fine, but it's going to have to carry itself more on the story than After the Rain did. It's also ongoing, which After the Rain was at the time the manga was produced, although it's since ended. So some doubts here on this. We're going to presume this is probably going to be 1 cour, so they're going to have to leave things off in the middle to at least an extent, most likely. So there are a few yellow lights with this series, but on balance, I have enough positives that outweigh the negatives that I tend to think this one is going to be probably very good. And that's Kowloon Generic Romance. Next up, another sequel, Kuroshitsuji Midori no Majo-hen. So G Fantasy is the wonderful shonen publication in which Jibaku Shonen Hanako-kun and Black Butler both run, among other good series. It's a very kind of a demographic, genre-breaking kind of a collection. It's shonen with a largely female audience, it's fair to say, for their big series. The number 3 series in that publication is Tokyo Aliens, which is one of the ones I highlighted in our Next Big Thing episode, which has recently had an anime announcement or an anime greenlit. So Kuroshitsuji and Hanako-kun are the twin titans of the magazine. Uh, Kuroshitsuji ran in winter. Now we've got, or in fall. Hanako-kun is on the winter season, then is passing the baton back to Kuroshitsuji for the spring. This is the shortest we've ever had to wait between seasons of Kuroshitsuji. Hopefully that means the next season of Hanako-kun, of which there should be plenty of manga, will come a lot sooner than the 4 years or whatever it was since the first season, 5 almost. I love them both. I think they're both really wonderful series. I do think on balance Hanako-kun is better, but Kuroshitsuji is awfully good. It's 2 of its seasons have ranked in my year-end top 10. Book of Circus quite comfortably. So I have a pretty high expectation for this season of Kuroshitsuji. This is called the Emerald Witch Arc, and it takes place in Germany. There's a werewolves involved and witches, and the only thing that can really torpedo Black Butler for me is when Toboso Sensei, the mangaka, gets a little bit too self-indulgent with all the over-the-top vamping. And small v vamping. I'm not talking about vampires, but you know what I mean. Characters like Grell and Undertaker can be a lot to take. But hopefully this change of venue, we're in Germany. Hopefully, usually when we move to another location, we don't get those characters as much. And typically the best runs in Kuroshitsuji have been like Book of Circus and the public school arc, where we have minimal involvement from those type of characters. I'm hoping that Emerald Witch Arc, Midori and Majo-hen, will follow that track. Have not read ahead this far in the manga, so I don't know details on it. But I think it's generally regarded by manga readers to be a pretty good arc, so I don't have any expectation that we're going to see a big quality drop here for Kuroshitsuji. It'll be interesting to see the episode count on this. This is a series that's typically gone unusual episode counts to because of the arc structure that Toboso uses. They don't often fit neatly into 12, 13 episode cores. So I don't know whether this is going to be 10 episodes, 12 episodes. Not really sure. But it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't be the first time that we saw Black Butler go with an unusual episode count. But it is going to be one core. I think we know that. Last show in this category is another sequel. This one is Aharen-san wa Hakarenai Season 2. I loved the first season of Aharen-san. Didn't quite crack my top 10 the year it came out, which was 2022. But it is a very good series. It is a very good series. That was a good year. It was a tough year for it to crack. And I really just have a strong affection for it. It's a romantic comedy that's more romance than comedy, but that doesn't mean there isn't good romance here. Aharen-san is, if you haven't seen the first season, she's a little tiny high school girl who speaks in a very, very soft voice to the point where people can't hear what she's saying. And she ends up bonding with this big, hulking, sweet-natured high school kid named Raido. We eventually learn his first name is Matsuboshi Raido. And while you think Aharen's speech pattern is the hook in the series, the hook is actually Raido's imagination, which is completely over the top and bizarre. And because her open-ended communication lends itself to it, it gives you some very interesting and funny flights of fancy from Raido. So it's just, those two are a great combination. They're really great together. It's a sneaky, pretty series too. It's really interesting visually. And I have a pretty high expectation for this second season here too. And then, judging by the length of the manga, this is a slightly uncertain, because the first season in one core covered 67 chapters. The manga ended at 167. So obviously, if you're going to cover 100 chapters in one core, you got to go at it. That's exactly 1/3 more than they covered in the first season. So I imagine they could do it, and I imagine it's a lot more likely that they will do it than splitting that up into 2 cores, or maybe ideally you'd love to see a second season and then a couple of OVAs, but I think more likely it'll just be, we're going to fit 100 chapters into 12 or 13 episodes, which, c'est la vie, it is what it is. To be honest with you, I didn't really expect Aharen-san to get a second season, so I'm pretty thrilled that it has. So if it turns out to be, a little more fast-paced than I would prefer, I'll live with it. And that, friends, is the highest expectations category. And we go on to mid-table, which, as I say, until just a couple days ago, in fact, was the smallest mid-table I think I've ever had in a preview. Now it's 4 shows, which is still very small. But at least we have 4. We have some shows you'd say, why is that not a higher ranking? Lazarus, which, of course, is by the other Watanabe, the other great director named Watanabe Shinichiro, who's back at MAPPA after some time mainly at Bones. At MAPPA, he did Zanki no Terror, which was very meh. Sakamichi no Apollon, which was excellent, but way too fast-paced. Speaking of fast-paced. Watanabe, for everything he's done in his career, Cowboy Bebop, Space Dandy, everything else, is one of the most legendary directors in anime. And so anytime he directs a series, which is not that often these days, it's a big deal. This one is in mid-table because 2 main reasons. His last few projects, which was a Carol and Tuesday, which to me was an extremely mediocre anime, and then a couple of anime films, which I didn't think were anything special. So the trend with Watanabe Shinichiro, excuse me, is not positive at this point. And generally speaking, I prefer him working with someone else's material as the director rather than writing himself, although he did write the best episode of Space Dandy, which is one of the best anime episodes ever. And he can write well. He hasn't tended to write well a lot of the time. He is the main writer here, so that's another reason my expectations are a little more modest. He does have Sato Dai, who is one of the old lions of anime writing, mainly a Bones guy, but on board as well. Lazarus sci-fi, which is obviously Watanabe's bailiwick. It's set in 2052. There's a scientist who's invented some kind of a cure-all drug which has eliminated disease, but then he disappears for 3 years, comes back 3 years later and says, oh, by the way, that miracle drug, everyone who took it will die in 3 years. So it's an interesting premise. We'll see. Watanabe being able to pretty much recruit any talent he wants, no one says no to him. Even at MAPPA, you'd have to think that means we're going to get pretty good quality visuals here. You're tempted to say, oh, the music is going to be wonderful, but he's not working with Yoko Kanno or anything. And the last series he did, Carol and Tuesday, which was a music series with terrible music. So I'm not going to assume the music is going to be great, but it's Watanabe, so Lazarus, it gets your respect. You have to give it its due. Next, Anne Shirley, for my blogging compatriot Princess Usagi, is a huge fan of the Anne of Green Gables, which is the original books that these are based on by Lucy Maud Montgomery, who's a Canadian writer. It's about life on the Canadian prairie and a little orphan girl named Anne Shirley. In case you're wondering, yes, this has been done by anime before on more than one occasion, in fact, dating back almost 50 years. And there was a World Masterpiece Theater adaptation of it, which was ran for 50 episodes in 1979. So why did it need a new one now? Well, I don't know, but here it is. If there's a new adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, you had to figure NHK was going to be behind it, and they are. It's set for 24 episodes by a studio called The Answer Studio, which has been around for a while but hasn't done a lot of stuff that I'm intimately familiar with. And I actually didn't watch any of the earlier incarnations of Anne of Green Gables. I have not read the books, and to be honest with you, I don't think I've even seen any of the many Western adaptations of it for television or movies either. So I'm going in a little bit cold turkey here, although, as I say, Usagi loves it. And so we've got one series Samu loves and one series Usagi loves this season. This should be pretty good. I mean, people tell me the books are some of the best children's books ever written, so no reason to think this won't be good. Anne Shirley, better known to Western viewers as Anne of Green Gables. Next up, Kijin Gentoushou, which is the closest thing I would say to a sleeper this season. It's based on a novel, not a light novel, but an actual novel, which is always a good kind of a sleeper clue. And then it's a historical fantasy novel, Yatagarasu, etc. There's a lot of good track record there. Don't have any experience with the novels, but I know they're pretty well regarded. And even though this one doesn't have a huge name staff, Yokohama Animation Laboratory can kind of go either direction. It's a novel historical fantasy. It's a sleeper. It's about a demon sword wielder and a shrine maiden, a Miko. I have a little thing for Mikos, so that doesn't hurt either. There's a time travel element in here. A little bit of a crapshoot for me, but definitely a sleeper. And then last in this category, we have the aforementioned Moonrise, which is had been originally announced by Netflix in 2022, but was just announced this week as I record this week, or last week technically, because I'm recording on a Monday, that it's going to be airing in spring this year. In the first place, it's a mecha series coming from Wit, so that's a very interesting thing to begin with. Then we have the fact that Wit and Netflix have a good history with each other. Great Pretender. Wit is a great studio typically. The writer-creator here, Ubu Katato, is a pretty big name in anime. You have to figure there's probably a floor here with him being the main writer. There are some problematic things with his personal background. I won't delve into that too much here. I don't consider him a great writer by any stretch of the imagination. Like, for example, he took over Psycho-Pass from Urobuchi Gen, and nothing after Gen left really was that special as far as I'm concerned with Psycho-Pass. But you know, it's got a good staff, and it's Wit and it's mecha. So Wit mecha, okay, I'm interested. With Netflix producing, you have to figure it had a good production schedule, a good budget. The story here, another future story sci-fi. There's an AI called Sapienta, which is running things for Earth, and it keeps things nice and peaceful by sending all the crime and hazardous waste to the moon. But there are people living on the moon, and I don't know whether there's any kind of a moon Australia thing going on here, but people on the moon are not happy about having criminals sent there. So this is a lunar Earth warfare, civil war thing, maybe a rebellion. Kind of a very, very classic boilerplate sci-fi premise right there. We'll see where it goes. And then the modestly interested category, as I said, there's not a hell of a lot here. There's 12 shows, and for me, as far as expectations, they're all kind of in one big bucket. Nothing here I'm really hugely into. But just to go down the list, a couple that stand out. Summer Pockets is key, and it's by Studio Feel, which can be interesting. I'm hit and miss with Key. I did like Little Busters a lot. I did like Canon a lot. Not too fond of the other Key series, but we'll see. There's a series called Nazotoki wa Dinner no Ato De, which is another novel adaptation. This one is from Madhouse. Maybe just almost a sleeper vibe there. It has the director of Shirokuma Cafe, Masuhara Mitsuyuki, and it's about a couple of rich people who are working like an heiress and a rich industrialist who, for some reason, are working as police detectives. But there's a butler who ends up solving all the cases. Kind of dumb sounding premise in it, and also Kaji Yuki and Hanazawa Kana are two of the three leads, which is not like typically what I like. Although she can be fine. Even he can be fine in the right role. So, I mean, we'll see. Second season, Sentai Daishikkaku. That could be okay. I liked the first season more than I expected. Witch Watch. Weekly Shonen Jump adaptation. I really liked Shinohara Kenta's Kanata no Astra, but I haven't liked anything else he's done, and including Sket Dance, which was a huge hit. And I read a few chapters of Witch Watch, and frankly, they didn't do a hell of a lot for me. So I'm not having huge expectations there. Then the big matzo ball in this category is Kidou Senshi Gundam GQuuuuuuX. I don't even know how you say it. It's GQ with like 7 U's and then an X at the end of it. Gundam is not typically an area that I'm really hugely a fan of. Tomino's, like, he mixes moralizing and then teen death porn, and it doesn't really do much for me, even by mecha standards. However, the hook here is this is Studio Kara working with Sunrise here, which Kara doing doing TV anime is news to begin with. Ano Hideaki was involved in the creation of this. So obviously, you know, this is a big deal. And then you've got Tsurumaki, the director of Evangelion, one of the directors of creators of Evangelion, the creator and director of Fooly Cooly, which, as pedigrees go, it doesn't get much higher than Eva and Fooly Cooly. So, hey, who the hell knows? Again, most Gundam doesn't do much for me, and the premise here kind of has a cute girls doing Gundam thing vibe to it, which doesn't look super interesting. But the fact that it is Studio Khara doing TV, it is Tsurumaki, even it's even got Enokido Yoji, who was one of the most important writers at Gainax, who did writing on both Fooly Cooly and Evangelion. He's involved in series compositions, so you can't ignore this one. I mean, no matter what my expectations are, you can't ignore it. It could potentially be way better than I think it's going to be, or it could very easily be a show that I drop after 1 or 2 episodes. So that's easily the biggest wild card in the category. Other than that, I don't see a whole lot. Zatsu Tabi, that's Journey, some of the funniest English ever. There's a cat alien show called Uchuujin MuuMuu. Okay, Yaiba, an interesting one. Shin Samurai Den Yaiba, which is a remake of Aoyama Gosho's old Yaiba manga, which already got a 52 episode series way back in '93. I'm not even that big a fan of Meitante Conan, so his involvement is not a huge draw for me, but I guess it's significant. And again, the wit is involved. So anytime wit is involved, okay, that's interesting. So we'll keep an eye on that. The Will Definitely blogs this season are the 4 in the top 4: Vigilante, Kowloon Generic Romance, Kuroshitsuji, Midori no Majo-hen, and then Aharen-san Season 2. The only thing I can really call a sleeper is probably Kijin Gentoushou. I can't call Kowloon a sleeper because I think everyone expects that to be good, or most people do. And maybe Nazotoki Wadeno no Ato De is maybe that's a bit of a sleeper. I'm not going to call it a sleeper though. OVA category, wow, we have 3 seasons in a row with an actual OVA. This time around, it's Natsume Yuujinchou Shichi special, which is frankly is labeled as the 13th episode of the season. I can't find anything that looks like a synopsis on this, so I have no idea what this episode is going to be about. But it's Natsume Yuujinchou, it's fine. You always like to see that, and a couple of their special episodes / OVAs have been really, really good. So we'll see how that goes. They've also tended to be anime original, although since this is listed as an episode 13, it may not be. Nothing on the theatrical side. Quite a few films being released this season, but nothing that struck me as being worth previewing. Just nothing in my lane. And that, friends, is the Lost in Anime Spring 2025 season preview. And again, my pledge to be shorter than normal. It doesn't matter how busy I am. I can't keep these damn things under half an hour. But on balance, looks like maybe an average season, but maybe one with a weird, as I say, kind of a weird, funky hourglass shape. And maybe more boom bust potential than most seasons because of the presence of directors like, like Watanabe Ayumu, and like Tsurumaki, so maybe a little more boom bust potential than most seasons have. But the 4 shows in the top category are good enough that you don't expect it's going to be a complete bust. And like I said, it would be a major surprise to me if Anne Shirley and Kijin Gentoushou aren't at least good. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this preview. I hope, as always, you enjoy the previews. If you would care to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel, that's obviously much appreciated. And for those of you, a special thank you, as always, to those of you who support Lost in Anime, Lost in Animaniacs, or whatever you want to call yourselves. I'm deeply, deeply grateful to you. But even if you just browse the site, even if you comment, I mean, of course, I'm deeply grateful to you too. You're all part of the family. But you know, my hosting costs more than doubled again this year, and it just gets harder and harder to keep this thing going. So whatever support you, the financially supportive fans, you know, you have a special place in my heart just because you're the ones who allow me to keep doing this. And as much work as it is, and as tired as I get, it is something I love doing, and I hope I'm able to keep doing it at least for a while longer. So thank you very much as always. Hope you enjoyed the preview. If you comment here, either on YouTube here or on the website, I love comments, and I tend to reply to most of them. So please comment. And until we meet again, I will sign off as I always do, without someone here to scold me for talking about the weather. To by all means, please, 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 for the love of God, stay frosty.